in fact, away right now, and he asked if I could cover again, and I do really look forward to this. I should warn you, school wraps up. We are done, so I got nothing really planned for tomorrow. I'm only going to cover one verse, but I got about 12 pages here. And I got nowhere to be tomorrow. So we're going to just settle in, okay? Oh, and on top of that, because there's no school tomorrow, Pastor Dan, we don't have to take down the chairs, right? So I've got extra time. There's no time to we'll be here for, no, I'm kidding. I'm really not going to, I hope I'm not going to take you too long. But I will at least warn you that they do keep that one particular light right in line with the clock, so I have no idea what time it is at any given point. Welcome back to Wednesday night service, and thank you for laughing at my bizarre, entertaining attempts at humor. Pastor Frank and I have been covering the book of Philippians for quite some time now. We began Philippians some months back, and we've been going deeper and deeper. And of course, the book of Philippians is all about joy, and Paul is writing all about joy, even in the midst of suffering, even in the midst of work, and so on and so forth. So as of late, Pastor Frank has dug back into chapter 3, some stuff that I had covered at one point, but he came back with some other bigger issues, tied some stuff in, and I don't want to step in on that because he's on a roll, and I'm just as fascinated as you are by some of the things he's been covering in chapter 3. And I did actually reach chapter 4 a little while back, and then he backed up again, and we went forward and back and forth. So I'm going to pick up where I left off last time, and I cleared this with him. He knows I'm going to get into chapter 4, and I'll bet he's going to cover this again too, okay, because there's some neat stuff in here, but there's something that I kind of found along the way. And if you recall, because I'm a teacher here at the school, I also do chapel, and in my chapels, I found that Philippians was where I wanted to be. So at some point, I was teaching Philippians before. Well, in the beginning, Pastor Frank was covering verses and so on, and I was picking up things he said, and I'd use them in chapel. But I do 2 chapels a week at least, and he only did 1 on a Wednesday. So I passed by. So a lot of these things I've talked about a bunch of times with the young people. So you get the second, they were the beta test, and you guys get the advanced version of these things. But then that is what our Wednesday night service is supposed to be, right? We're going to dig deeper into the Word than we get in a normal sermon. We're going to try and get into the understanding, the life application, and so on. So where I'm going to take you today, I'm going to take you to Philippians chapter 4, and we're going to jump over those first few verses because we did them a while back, and we're going to cover verse 4 of Philippians chapter 4. Paul's conclusion of the book of Philippians. It's only a 4-chapter book. It's a nice short epistle. He's written off to his friends at the church at Philippi. These are people he helped bring their church into existence, even though they started out by throwing him in prison. That was his first experience in this place. He starts out thrown in prison, and everything turns itself back around, and Paul is now thankful for them. They have become one of his heartfelt churches. Paul's conclusions often end, a lot of his epistles end, with a series of what we can call ethical imperatives. Ooh, see, we get deep on Wednesdays, right? Ethical imperatives, things you should do. Ethics are like the way you're supposed to behave, and an imperative is an instruction. So basically, he runs through a list of things, and in this particular case, he's going to tell us to rejoice, be gentle, not be anxious, pray, be thankful. These are all ethical imperatives. Do these things, he says. They're not optional. This isn't like if you feel like it, be thankful. It's not a when you get around to it, pray. These are the things Paul is saying, do these things, and they're good for you. It's kind of like eat your vegetables or wear a hat when you go outside. There's reasons for those things, right? So Philippians 4:4 in the New King James Version, it reads, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice. Now, if you're a fan of the old King James Version, before the NKJV came out, the King James Version phrases it like this, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. And the reason we have so many translations, and I don't know, I was joking about newcomers. You might be new to a Bible study. You might be new to the faith. This might be the beginnings of your digging into the Bible. Some of you guys are old school. You've been doing this for a really long time, I'm sure. The reason we have so many different translations is because the English language changes radically over time. Most languages do. English isn't, well, okay, I'm a history teacher, but I also teach English. So I got to say, English is not really a language. English is 3 languages wearing a trench coat, pretending to be a language. It's really a mess. We got roots from all different origins and so on, and it changes meaning quickly. Some languages stay about the same for longer periods, but even those change over time. I'm told Mandarin Chinese is not very different from what was spoken 2,000 years ago. But if you just go back to Shakespeare, thee, thou, thouest, therefore'th, okay, you've got some weird changes. Go back to Chaucer, and that's only a few hundred years before Shakespeare, and it's gibberish. One in April showers do shake the roof broods. What are they talking about? Go back a few hundred years before that, you get something like Beowulf, which is written in something called Old English, and it's like Beowulf, sword. It's gibberish, absolute. At least with Chaucer, you can make sense out of it slowly. Shakespeare is considered modern English. Just let that sink in. 1600s, modern English. But Shakespeare's English is the English of the King James Bible. And in just those couple hundred years, a lot of words have drifted away from our use. They've become archaic. Others have changed meaning. And phrases that Shakespeare would have used or were written in the King James Bible no longer mean what they once did. So I'm trying to make a case for you for why we understand there are multiple variations of biblical translations for you. They all say the same thing. And each time an organization gets together and tries to translate, you do realize the King James Bible was written to make it easier to understand the Bible in contemporary language. And of course, now we use that one as the one that we're like, well, make it really sound fancy. So in the King James, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Part of the reason I said you might know that, especially if you're old school, if you've been around church for a long time, before we had our Maverick City and our Hillsongs and so on, we did choruses in church. They were just very simple, very easy melodies and so on. And there was one that people would sing. It was this particular verse. We take scripture, throw a bunch of notes to it. So it was basically, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. I'm not seeing any recognition in anyone's eyes. I am that old. Okay, I got a couple people, okay. And then you could do it as a round, because the next part of it is rejoice, rejoice, and again I say. You got that again I say rejoice refrain in there. So you get half the room singing rejoice in the Lord, rejoice, rejoice, and it goes back and forth like row, row your boat. This is the church I grew up in, man. Okay, so I know that old verse, but who says, and again I say, you know, if a teacher tells you a thing, you know, this is a verb, and again I say, this is a verb. It doesn't have the same impact. But at the time the King James Bible was being written, repetition like this, and in fact, if you go back to Greek as well, if you talk the way Paul does it, when God repeats himself in the Bible, there's a reason. He wants to get your attention. It's why sometimes Jesus says, verily I say unto you. Okay, King James, it means truly, okay? But sometimes it doesn't say verily. It says, verily, verily, I say unto you. That's like a real serious, pay attention. So in this case, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. I've repeated that line a lot. See, I told you I'm only going to cover one verse today. Because I went through that whole little explanation, I want to point this out to you now. Joy, rejoice, joy is commanded. Paul isn't saying, when you're feeling good, rejoice. No. When does he say we're supposed to rejoice? Thank you. We're good with words, right? Always means, thank you. I mean, it's the best definition I could give you, too. All the time, right? Okay. Joy is commanded here. So it can't be. The joy we're talking about, even if we misuse the word sometimes, we often do. We take words and we use them the wrong way. It cannot be an emotion. It cannot be a feeling. Because those are transitory. Those change based on the circumstances around you. You can't control feelings. You can't control emotions. And if you're like, I can. Well, you're an alpha personality and you think you can. I understand that. But think about how many times somebody's like, don't be scared. Oh, thank you. I was, but now that you told me to stop, I'm not anymore. Okay? If you've ever been home alone, you hear a weird noise, you call somebody up, like, there's something, I don't know what's going on. Don't be scared. Thank you. That's what I was calling for. I appreciate that. I'm all better now. Okay? We often have a tendency to tell people how to feel, but the truth is you can't change that. You can't change your emotions. You can't change your feelings. Once you feel it, you feel it. If you've ever been upset about something and you're shaking and you're trying to hold your voice together and you're it's tough. It's tough. That's emotion, right? So if it's not a feeling, if it's not an emotion, then what is it? Joy is a state of mind. It's a perspective. And that, believe it or not, you can control. You might not want to. Well, you kind of want to, but you might not be willing to. Okay? Joy is something that is a state of mind. You choose to focus on positive rather than negative. You choose to think about how this will get better instead of how it will get worse. You're forcing optimism. Okay? And the perspective that you use will dictate your behavior. So this is all life lesson stuff, right? This is modern psychology, and the Bible talks about it 2,000 years before. So the state of mind, which you can control simply by choosing to pay attention to it. That's how you control state of mind, by what you look at. And the truth is, you can go the other way too. You can find something working out just great and focus on what'll probably go wrong, and you can spoil it. Pastors told that story about the two kids with the pony. The two kids who were, one's overly optimistic, the other's overly pessimistic. Did I tell this already? No. Okay. The parents decide they want to teach them both a lesson. The kid who's overly optimistic is just always happy about things. And it's a terrible idea to try to break the kid. But they're like, he's going to get disappointed eventually and it's going to crash him. So let's do it now. So at Christmas time, they decide what they're going to do is they're going to teach both of them how to swap their perspective. The kid who is always pessimistic and always sees problems is given hundreds of presents. They're all up in his room. They're all sitting there wrapped and ready with his name on all of them. The other kid is going to go upstairs and he's going to find a pile of manure in the middle of his room. Okay? The optimistic kid is going to find manure in his room. They both run upstairs. Your presents are waiting for you, and neither one comes back down. The parents are like, what's going on? The parents go upstairs, and the kid who's always depressed and always finding the wrong things and the flaws in things is sitting in the middle of his room. Presents are everywhere, and he's crying. And they're like, what's wrong? There's all these presents, and I know my name is on them, but they're going to make such a mess when I unwrap them, and there's going to be so much garbage to clean up, and I don't want to have to pick it all up, and I'm just going to have to carry it all out to the garbage. Oh, my goodness, that's the takeaway? Look at all the gifts. And he's just not even looking at them. The other kid, they go to open up that door, and he is now covered in the manure. He's got it everywhere, and he's digging through the pile with his hands, and they're like, what are you doing? And he's laughing and smiling and giggling, and they're like, what's going on? He goes, I haven't found it yet, but I know there's a pony in here somewhere. State of mind. Did I just burn one of Pastor Frank's favorite stories? You guys have heard this one before, right? Okay. You can choose joy. You can't necessarily choose happy. You can make the best of things. But happy is an emotion. Joy is deep down. It's a perspective. So let's look at, just real quick, I mentioned other verses. The more modern versions of the Bible right now, the more modern language versions of the Bible, they are not changing God's word. Please make sure that doesn't become your takeaway of, well, any Bible that you... No, it has to be done accurately. It has to be done scholarly. Okay. In this case, the NIV, which is one of the ones that's accepted as fairly strong as a modern variation of the Bible, reads, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Which makes more sense than, and again I say, right? I will say it again. I've said it once, I'll say it twice. The NLT, one of a more modern, a fairly recent variation of the Bible, which took an old paraphrase version from like the 70s and 80s, which was... and actually really improved upon their translation. I'm beginning to really like the NLT. I didn't know it existed as such, but it is very, very good. The NLT says, always be full of joy in the Lord. I will say it again, rejoice. Always be full of joy in the Lord. And then there's another variation of a translation of the Bible. It's not a straight, clean translation. It's more of an emotional translation, if it makes sense. You might be familiar with the Message Bible. The Message Bible is a great paraphrase. It puts it into an easier vernacular, but it runs the risk of losing some of the specifics. But if you're just looking for the general oomph of the words, you get this. Celebrate God all day, every day. I love that. Celebrate God all day, every day. But then he follows it, because remember the again I say rejoice, with, I mean, revel in him. That's more, rejoice, revel. Ooh, it is a word we don't use very often, okay? It's not just, yay, God. It's like, touchdown moments at the Super Bowl. Revel in him. When Paul is saying rejoice in the Lord always, he's not just saying, don't worry, be happy. It's bigger than that by far, okay? So when are we supposed to rejoice in the Lord? Always. Very good. This is very similar to something Paul says in another one of his epistles. In the book of Thessalonians, chapter 5, verse 18, 1 Thessalonians 5:18. I'm speaking slowly so that they can get it up on the screen in time, because I already know you're not looking them up anyway. 1 Thessalonians 5:18. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. God's will for you is that in everything you give thanks. You're supposed to give thanks in what now? Okay, and you're supposed to rejoice when? Always, everything. Good, good. So you're getting a tax audit? Yes! Praise the Lord! You don't have to be happy about it, but you can find a way to rejoice in that. Okay? You stub your toe? Ooh, I'm so happy in Jesus. No, I'm not happy at all. My toe hurts. But I know I can rejoice in the Lord because God says I can do it always. God doesn't give us instructions that are impossible. God doesn't say, lick your elbow, which I'm told is impossible. I guess if you were double jointed in your shoulder, you could possibly dislocate and maybe be able to do that. But most people cannot do that, okay? God doesn't call you to lick your elbow. It's not a thing you can do. Why would God say rejoice always if you couldn't? Now, will you? That's a different story. But he knows you can. He wouldn't ask if he didn't think you could. Romans 8:28 kind of gives us a little bit more of a clue as where we're going with this. Okay, so there's a couple of verses that talk about this idea. Paul brings up this one in Romans 8, chapter 8, verse 28. And we know, you guys know this one, right? And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and to those who are called according to his purpose. I added in a conjunction there. It's not and. To those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. We know that what things work together? All things, all things. And we know that we're supposed to give thanks in everything, and we're supposed to rejoice always, always, everything, all things. God is not quibbling around here with, find a couple things that make you happy and just go with that. Most things will work in your favor. Okay, this is like when we talk about how they're the 10 commandments and not the 10 suggestions. There's no equivocating here. There's no lawyer that's going to come in and go, well, on these events you can do this, but on these things they're not covered and you don't have to. There's no loophole here. All things means all things. And that does mean crummy things. That does mean tragedies. We're supposed to find rejoicing in tragedies. Now, that's hard unless you've practiced. Because what happens is you practice with the little things, and then the bigger things come along. You're like, oh, I did it with that little, I can do it with this. You practice with the, I got a C and I was hoping for an A on my paper. And eventually you can deal with big tragedies and like, I already know how to cope with this. So here's what I'm going to kind of give you guys a little bit of a walk around here for how to actually do this. Okay. Now, all I can do is give you the theory. The application has to be your choice. Okay. So take a look here. I'm going to tell you all things. Romans 8:28 gives us something interesting here. It provides condition. The other two just tell us to do it. But Romans gives us a reason that we are participatory in this, okay? The conditional, if then, right? The conditional here is that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. So condition number 1, love God. I'm just going to guess you're okay with that one. You're here tonight. If you didn't love God, why would you be here tonight? Maybe you're searching, and that's a possibility. Maybe you'll grow to love God, okay? But in most cases, if we're talking to people in the church, we're talking about people who have a love for God. So we're okay there. It's the other part, the called according to his purpose. We've got to remember now, we are called to be believers. We are called to be Christians. But are we following his purpose? The phrase called to be according to his purpose is that we're on the path we're supposed to be following. The conditional is, if you're doing what God has set you to do, it is going to work out. It may not seem like it at the time, but there is an end game where God knows the whole story and he sees it coming. His purpose. Which now brings us to why some of us still struggle with the idea of rejoicing when there are hard times. Now, part of it is lack of practice. You don't rejoice in those little things, and therefore you're not ready to rejoice in the really big things when they come along. We're all that way. I'm not pointing fingers at you. We all kind of go that route. Everything we do is a little at a time, and we get better and better. Remember when you were first driving? You turn the wheel and you turn your neck with it every time? I almost drove into a cornfield one time. My mom's like, look how tall the corn is. Really? Like, every time I turn my neck, you get better at it. Okay? It got to the point where I was driving my dad's riding lawnmower out on the big front lawn, and I went to make a 90-degree turn, and I was reaching for the blinker. I wasn't even thinking about it. You just do that, right? Once you're used to doing something, it becomes your nature. I'm not even going to call it second nature. It becomes your nature. So here it is. Ready? Right? This is the big deal here. This is why I'm only covering one verse today. The reason we don't rejoice, the reason troubles come and we mope and whine and complain, is because we do not understand the sovereignty of God. That's really the core of it. It's because we don't trust that he knows what he's doing. Oh, we up here, of course he knows, he's God. It's in here somewhere that we've been betrayed by people. We've been betrayed by authority figures, in some cases parents, police. People make mistakes, and therefore we have to think, but then God's just a big version of that. And we don't understand he is sovereign. Part of that is because we're Americans and we fought to not have sovereigns in this country, and it's understandable. We've got freedom here, and that's a great thing. I love this country. But we didn't trust the monarch of England. We're not about to trust the monarch of heaven. We don't have that kind of respect, right? The coronation just a few months back, or a few weeks back, actually, King Charles III now is on the throne, and England just falls all over them. This is amazing! And we're like, we go through this every 4 years. We swap out leaders all the time. Sometimes we don't even wait the full 4 years, okay? Look at you, Nixon. Okay, sorry. History teacher me just kicks in once in a while. So I want to take you to a verse that demonstrates the sovereignty of God, or at least someone who understands the sovereignty of God. If you've ever read the book Job, some people open it up just because they're looking for a job. The book Job it's hard. It's a hard book. Sit down with Pastor Frank sometime. He's got a whole take on Job that's fascinating, okay? The book Job follows a guy who falls on hard times, and that is putting it lightly. I mean, the worst things possible happen to Job. And Job is still loyal to God. He's not willing to walk away. And at some point, late in the book, by chapter 42, this is Job 42, verse 2, Job is asked by God, do you think I can handle this? Do you think I got this? Do you think I can do this? And Job's answer is, I know that you can do everything, and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. No purpose. Oh, we used that word just a minute ago. That's over here in the Romans book. According to his purpose. No purpose. Nothing God, we don't use the word purpose often anymore, except I did it on purpose. Okay, purpose is I've determined to do a thing. That's what purpose means in Old King James and all the way up into modern language. We just don't use it often in our normal vernacular. No determination that you're going to do a thing can be withheld from you. Okay. In the NIV, it says, no purpose of yours can be thwarted. I know NIV is supposed to be modern, but who says thwart in their daily lives, okay? But you know what that means, right? Nothing you've decided to do can be blocked by someone else. There's none of that, like, drop that little red checker in there. Pretty sneaky, sis. Connect 4. Okay, none of that's going to happen. You don't block God. He's already got another plan, okay? And in the NLT, the more recent version, we have, I know that you can do anything, and no one can stop you. So Job gets that God can do what God wants to do. So you're in a situation. Pick a trouble. It could be real extreme tragedy. It could be mild discomfort, whatever it might be. And God can do something about it. But you're still in the trouble. So does God not care? Ooh, wow. Quiet for just a second. Those of you online, the air conditioner just turned off. I was like, ooh, okay. Yeah, that is a logical go-to. And if it was a person, that would be a reasonable conclusion. Mr. D watches another student cheat, shrugs his shoulders, and goes back to grading. Mr. D doesn't care. It's too much work. It's the end of the week. I don't want to do anything about that. People fail us. So we assume that if God doesn't jump in and take action, it's because either he can't or, and this is somehow worse, doesn't want to. And it's because we don't trust the sovereignty of God. God is numero uno. He is at the top of the chain. There is no appeal beyond God. Okay? Even according to the United States Constitution, the supreme decision-making power in the judicial process is the Supreme Court. But they're wrong about that because you can still go to God over the Supreme Court. And God overturns things. He may not even realize it, but they work for him. So authorities all fall under this one sovereign God. So the conclusion then is, I prayed, it didn't happen. God can't, or God doesn't want to. And we're missing God has a bigger plan as the other option. That's the sovereignty of God for us to understand. So if Job says that, over in the Psalms, in the book of Psalms, we have another verse in Psalm 37, verse 24. Psalm 37, verse 24. We are told that the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. You usually hear this translated as the steps of a righteous man. I couldn't find that version. I mean, good man, righteous man, same thing. But even the King James, it's a good man. And good just sounds a little bit simple. Righteous sounds so awesome, okay? Anyway, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Ordered, as in structured and coordinated. Not ordered like, do it. That's a whole different sovereignty. Okay, God's not telling the righteous man how to walk. He's showing him the safe path. I don't know if you've ever gone to somebody's garden party and they've got lights around their garden so you know where the path is. If you try to go out to their back deck and you can't find it because you're stumbling through the weeds and through the rose bushes and everything, that's why we put rope lights backstage. Anyone in our drama teams, you guys know, you go backstage, you need rope lights. Without those things, you come running out, the big bright lights are all over, yeah, amen, and we run off, I can't see a thing. You need the rope lights, okay? So the steps of a righteous man or a good man are ordered by the Lord. NIV version, New International Version. The Lord makes firm, I just like that phrase, the Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in him. The Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in him. He makes your steps strong and firm. You ever walk on something that's not stable and you thought it was? Little kid, how many of you guys, little guys, when you were younger, you like to break ice? Did you grow up in the North? If you didn't grow up in the North, you have no idea what I'm talking about. You walk around like, oh, crack, crack. You step a little further, crack, crack, crack. And how long did you play on the ice? Until you fell in, and then you went home and gave all your wet clothes to your mom. That's as long as you could possibly go. Nobody waited until okay, I pushed my luck, I'm done. No, we always played until someone fell in. I remember one time I was playing out on a little pond. It was a shallow construction site, actually, and there was this log right out, a little bit further away, and I got long legs, and I could step out to the log, and I'm like, I'm going to go stand on that log. It's like a little island on the ice. That's kind of, because I knew the ice wasn't strong, and I stepped out there. I did not know the log had been floating when the ice froze over. It was a floating log. It was not on the bottom. So that meant it dropped only about maybe 4 inches, but it's round, and it was enough that I rolled, knees hit the ice, shattered the ice, went down, sat backward, so all the way up to my waist. In that deep of water, about 6 inches of water, I managed to get all my pants wet. Now, I'm going to also just date myself here. This was in the 70s. Wow, I'm dating myself. Okay, this was in the 70s. Corduroy pants were in. I went to school in corduroy pants, okay? Oh, there you go. Well, corduroys were always fun because, you could walk down the hallway and like, except when they get wet and then freeze on the way home, they turn to cardboard. So it was no longer, it was it was very, very uncomfortable. I'm just saying. I thought I had a firm step. I'm sorry for the rabbit trails. I thought I had a firm step. It was not firm at all. Okay? The steps of the righteous man are firm because the Lord places them. In the NLT, the Lord directs, and there it is. It's that whole idea. The Lord shows the path. The Lord directs the steps of the godly. The godly people have a path to follow. The little lights go on. You know where to go. You've been in an airplane. The lights will light up to show you the way. It's one aisle. Why do we need... I'm sorry. I'm confused by that. There's no need for arrows. He delights, and I love this part of the verse, he delights in every detail of their lives. The Lord is like, oh, yes, everything that interests you. If you've ever had a little prayer partner, some of us have children... Little guys get interested in things you just don't care about. I mean, honestly, you got to sort of like, yeah, and the Cheerios got soggy. That's so close to interesting. It just isn't even there yet, okay? Basically, the Lord delights in every detail of our lives, okay? But God is not a moral monster. I went earlier to that connection of, well, then why isn't he making everything better? Why aren't my problems going away? Why have my credit card bills continued to increase? And why am I out of a job? Or why have I gotten sick? If God is sovereign, can't he fix this? Or he is sovereign and doesn't care. And those two things are what keeps so many people from engaging in the Lord. Okay? There are Christians who feel this way but won't talk about it because it hurts. There are non-Christians who don't want to give themselves over to the Lord because this is what they're afraid the deal is. He is not making the bad things happen. But he's sovereign, so if they happen, they must happen because he wants to. This is the same argument for people come along and say, well, if God is such a good God, how come he created sin? Well, that does seem to be logical, except it's not. If you take some logic classes, you end up with some negations in there that undo that statement. God didn't create sin any more than light creates darkness by not being around. Right? You can't actually turn on a dark. You know, the room is nice and bright right now, but we're going to turn on the dark so you don't... Can you imagine the opposite of a thunderstorm? Like these flashes of darkness would suddenly be accompanied by a high-pitched wail, okay, instead of thunder. You know, there's no such thing. You can't turn on a dark, right? So basically, dark is only the absence of light. You can add light to darkness, and the darkness is gone. And in an astonishing way as well, if you've ever done these little experiments, we could turn out all these lights. Once your eyes adjust and all, I could light a single match, and you'd be able to see the people in this room. From a match. You know, it would be dark and shady, but you could see them because light penetrates darkness. So when we talk about why did God allow sin, if anything exists, then its absence creates vacuum. That's what sin is. And if tragedy is the result of sin in this world, then it's without God present in the situation because people don't want him in the situation, and God says, I'll let you do your thing. Not because God can't be there. He is sovereign. My example for you is this. You all seen movies before. Probably most of you have seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. New Indiana Jones movies coming out. Cautiously hopeful. But the original Raiders of the Lost Ark, if you guys have seen, I've seen this part of the movie maybe 100 times. I've seen the movie itself quite a few times. Remember when Indy has the bag of dirt? He's got that bag of dirt, and he walks up there, and he puts it on, and it's never the right amount of dirt. It's always just a little too heavy, and the whole thing, and the wheel comes down, the wall, the rolling ball after everything. That scene, okay? Now, I've watched that movie a bunch of times, and I guarantee if I put the scene up, I don't have the wherewithal right now to put the clip up here, but if I put that clip, I can tell you as it's happening what's about to happen. I can tell you, you're going to put that dirt down. Yep, it's not the right weight. It's too much. It's too much, Indy. And he's not going to listen. He's not going to. And it's going to happen. Now, the very fact that I know it's going to happen does not mean I made it happen. Just means I know it's going to happen. I've seen it before. Forget thinking about God making every detail take place like he's a screenwriter. God already knows. That's the price, if you will, of being omniscient. He knows what you're going to do. He knows when you're going to do it right. He knows when you're going to do it wrong. Which means if you're going to do it wrong, he's got the safety net waiting. My daughter, when she was very little, fairly, very little, and she still wasn't walking yet, was sitting on a couch one day, and she turned her little back to the edge of the couch. She was kind of sitting like this, and I looked, oh, no, baby, swish. I spun her around so her back was to the back, but she was playing with a doll, and I don't know, she crawled around, and she moved around, and she ended up this way again. And, sweetie, just push her back in here, and one more time, and I'm like, this is going to go on. This is going to keep happening. So here's what I did. Maybe the worst parenting, I don't know. Took a cushion from another couch, put it down on the floor, and then I sat back. Killed me to do it. And I waited, and I watched as she moved herself where I told her not to be, and this time I let her. And I knew what was going to happen. She got herself over here, and she leaned backward, and she went over. Now, she only fell about 12 inches. I made a nice big cushion for her. She bounced. But I saw her face. I saw terror. She had never fallen before. But because of that, she didn't fall down the stairs later. She didn't fall off the deck. She learned what falling was. And I let it happen for her own good. I could have kept stopping. I'd still be trying to keep her from falling at 16, 17, 18. Oh, my goodness, she's turning 20. Okay, it would still be an issue. Okay, so let me get a little further here and explain why I'm talking about the sovereignty of God real quick here. The reason any of this is possible is because God is not just sovereign, but he has given us free will. Now we're getting into some deep philosophical stuff. We can get into, you can talk with some Calvinists and some Presbyterians about the sovereignty of God versus the free will of man. And there are those who argue that free will is just an illusion, that God has scripted it all out, and you just do what you're told to do. Yes. No, go ahead, yes. Gives me a chance to take a sip. Yes.
So with that understood, faith, what we say, what we do, how we act with him is what can make things better and not expect him to, he's not the one, like as you have said, he's not the one to control it. He's the one that keeps the principles in line that we can follow what he calls us to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a teacher, that's like a mini variation of the way God does things. I sometimes feel like I've given you what you need for the final, and now you just have to put it down. And I've had students not answer questions because they weren't sure if they were right. But you could take the chance. Well, I didn't want to be wrong. Wow. So zero's wrong, but at least we are in that position where God says, I've got this, and then you're going to have an opportunity. So that's where this free will idea comes from. Okay, the Bible does not actually have a verse that specifically says, man has free will, which is what's led to some disputes among theologians, and I don't want to start that issue with others, and you can take what you want and go with it. Their implication is consistent. Throughout Scripture, it is implied that your actions have consequence, both positive and negative. Your actions have consequence. If they were scripted, God becomes a moral monster because he says, you must now do this, you're going to turn bad. I truly, with all my heart, believe that at any point, Judas could have repented. Judas did not repent. Judas chose to do a wrong thing, but never turn around. Peter does a wrong thing. It's almost the same thing. denies Christ's authority. And Peter apologizes and repents when he's called out. Judas does not. Someone had to betray him. Can you imagine how awful that must have been if Judas never had a choice? Okay, I've got 11 guys and the jerk. You know, that's not how it plays out. We're told repeatedly Judas had a part in the ministry. When they went out 2 by 2, who got stuck with Judas if he was never really I've heard a preacher one time say Judas was never really a believer. How is that even possible? That makes Jesus kind of a dupe. He has no idea what's going on. How did he pick this guy? Someone was going to do it. Let's come back to free will. Free will. Joshua 24:15. I'm going to go through these kind of fast here. Joshua 24:15. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day who you will serve. If you don't think following God, Joshua says to the people who are rebelling, is a good plan, then choose who you will serve instead. Can you choose without making, I don't know, what's that word? Choice? No. Choice implies you get a say, right? Keep going. Mark 8:34. Mark 8:34. When Jesus had called the people to himself with his disciples also, he said to them, whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Those are all verbs. So you're going to deny yourself, you're going to take up the cross, and you're going to follow. Those all sound like choices. Jesus doesn't say, I'm taking you with me. He says, follow me. Follow is a choice. Move on to Revelation 3:20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, a conscious action. You know, I knock and then kick the door down like Dwayne Johnson and I show up in your home. That's not what he says he's going to do. He says, you open the door and I will come in and dine with him and he with me. Actually, that's just a variation on what Jesus said while he was walking the earth. Some of the red letters in Matthew 7:7. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. If you ask, if you seek, if you knock, all these things will come forward. You get to take part. It implies free will, not follow the script, read the lines, and do the thing you're told to do. Galatians 5:13, last one here on this point, and I'm going to give you a reason why I'm talking about all this anyway. Galatians 5:13, for you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Liberty is another way of saying freedom. You can be free. You have been called to liberty. Only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. You can choose. Choose to do right, choose to do wrong. So God is a sovereign God who allows us to participate in the cause and effect of our world. Many, if not all, many of the problems you and I face are of our own doing. If you follow them back to their cause and effect, you will almost always find you did a thing. No one likes to admit that. I'm not saying no one does admit it, but no one likes it. Yay, I messed up. Okay. If you follow the problem you're in right now backward far enough, most of those problems are mistakes you've put yourself in. Okay. I'm not blaming the victim here. You cut through a dark alley in New York, you don't deserve to be mugged, but you're more likely to be. And this isn't what a bad person for going down the alley. But what were you thinking? It's a dark alley in New York. We all know not to do that, don't we? You didn't. You decided to take the shortcut. It happens, right? We put ourselves in harm's way, and then we get kind of annoyed, like, God, why did you let this happen? And God's like, why did you go in the alley? It says earlier that, in Proverbs 16:9, it says, a man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. You sit there and go, I'm going to do this. And the Lord's like, and here's how you're going to get there. Okay, I love that he participates. I think I know what I'm going to do. And sometimes it's like, I was going over there, but what? But the path is going, but that. I knew a man one time, he was going to be a doctor. He was going to medical school. He was all excited about this. He was graduating his first years of college, was about to enter medical school, heard the call of God on his life. God spoke to him and said, missions work. He's like, oh, man, I was going to be a doctor. I mean, he was already prepared for this. I love this stuff, but I want to obey. I want to obey. He went to Bible school. He had already gotten his undergraduate. He'd gotten his 4-year degree, and now he re-enrolls in college and starts from scratch learning the Bible. He's all ready to go out in the mission field. He does like 4 years of schooling, gets ready. He is now going to be a missionary. He is committed. God said, be a missionary. And God said, now I want you to go to medical school. Like, God, I have spent 8 years in college already. I'm ready to do a thing. You told me not to be a doctor. And God basically said, not yet, but now I want you to be a doctor. This guy used to go into communist Russia. He used to go into communist China. He went places, Pastor Dan will tell you, places where Christian missionaries can't go, but Christian medical missionaries can. All of a sudden the doors, and he's like, so you want me to be a doctor who's a missionary? And God's like, either that or a missionary who's a doctor. I want you to be both. But you needed to be grounded in the Word first. Because can you imagine if he got his degree as a doctor, all that work, and then God says, now learn my Word. And he's like, oh, but I'm already committed to this. It would have been much harder for him. The path may not be the direct path that you think it should be. Be careful. Trust the sovereignty of God. Trust that the end zone is going to be where you'll be when you need to be there and the way you need to be there. So remember now, God is not only sovereign, and you don't only have free will, but here's point number 3. God is good. God all the time. Thank you. God is good all the time. Okay? Proverbs 16:9. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. Psalm 37:24. We read this one. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. God is a good God. He wants things to go the way they are best for you. Not always the way you think you want them to go. All right. So basically, I had a little example. I don't know how quickly you can move the camera, but start panning it that way. So there's my phone. I'm going to put my phone up here. So my phone is up here. Okay, and I want to get to my phone. Okay, and God has ordered my steps. There's some stuff in the way. I've got to kind of go around these things and so forth. But I don't want to go over there. I want to go over here. Come with me, camera. Come with me. Yeah, I want to go over here. I want to get out of these lights because they're hot and they're bright. I can see the clock now, and I realize it's almost time to get out of here. I'm much more comfortable over here. But now I want my phone. And as tall as I am, I can't reach it from here. Why you got to do this to me, God? I walked over here. My choice to be in the wrong place. And I'm complaining that I can't reach my phone. I'm going to give you an example from a weird source. Anyone familiar with the TV show The Office? Shame on you. No, okay. The TV program called The Office. There's a character, he's in HR. His name is Toby. Toby is the foil. Toby is a sad sack. Nothing goes well for Toby. And worse, the big boss, Michael Scott, hates him. Okay? Toby has a tiny little cubicle. We learn a bunch of things about Toby's personal life. His wife left him, took their kids. He hardly ever sees them. He's a dreadfully sad man. There's a weird little scene when Pam and Jim's kid is christened that he goes into the church and he just stands there and he looks up at the cross and he just says, why you gotta be so mean to me? And that's it. It's so funny. It's really not. It's a weird drop moment in the middle of a comedy. Like, what just happened? But I found something out that I did not catch. Earlier, there's a small little scrapbook. And we see a picture of Toby. We've learned a little bit about how Toby actually got married. Toby chased after a girl while he was in college, and he chased after a girl that he really didn't need to be involved with. And she got pregnant, and they had kids, and then she leaves him. But what we forget, do you remember what Toby was studying? He was in seminary. Toby was studying to be a priest, and he got drawn away. And he followed after a girl he thought he loved. He wanted to be in love with her. He wanted her to love, but she didn't. And now Toby blames God that his life is falling apart because he chose to follow a path God didn't lay out for him. Now, I'm not saying the writers of The Office are Christians, but someone might be in that group. I think they just kind of snuck that little idea in there because it's a great example of what we do all the time. We don't trust the sovereignty of God. So we say, I'm going to do it my way. And God's like, I have a better plan. If you walk right over there and grab the phone, you can, but I don't want to walk that way. I want to be on the other side. And God's like, that's not the path I laid for you. Their steps are ordered of God. Not ordered, you must do it. Ordered as in laid out to the perfect level. Okay, so my reach analogy, hopefully that makes some sense. We often blame God for the circumstances we create. I'm fond of parenting threads. I read all like the best parenting memes of the week and things like that. They amuse me. My daughter's 20 years old now, and I look back going, yeah, that's so true. Lady actually asked for prayer. I saw this she tweeted, please pray for my toddler. He's incredibly inconsolable at the moment because there is a bite that's been taken out of his waffle that he took a bite of. So true. So, I can understand you get a waffle like, wait a minute, someone bit. He took a bite of his waffle and now is inconsolable because there's a bite taken out of his waffle. You did this. We do this to God all the time. My students use the phrase, Mr. D gave me a bad grade. Not a lot of them. Most of them get good grades. But I don't give out grades. I got like this pile of them, like, I don't know, D. I don't have a pile of grades to give out. You earn those grades, okay? Be proud of whatever it is you get. Okay, I got an alumni in here. I had, probably not online. I got a question this week. We're doing finals. I got a question this week. Somebody came up to me with their final in hand. Like, I'm almost done, but I have a question. Is it okay? Can I ask a question? Like, you can, and I always answer this way. You can ask. I don't know if I can answer it, but you can ask. Go right ahead. And she goes, okay, so I don't know if the answer is A or C. Okay, you can hear it too. Okay, there's no question mark. That's not a question. That's a request for me to cheat. Yes, it's C. I can't help you with this. And I look and I said, you're going to have to choose. I would say pick one. Whatever one you think. You can flip a coin or you can go with the one you think is most likely. But that's not a question. A question is, what does this word mean? And I might not be able to tell you without telling you the answer, but I could at least consider. No. You're not asking God to do what he has planned. You're asking God to do it your way, okay? I had a student become utterly inconsolable once, way back, because another teacher had given them a grade and they weren't happy with the grade and was all just totally upset. And I said, wait, I'm sorry, hold on, because I suspected. And I said, are you upset because you got a 0? Or are you upset because you didn't get 100? And looking at me like, well, I didn't get a 0. I said, did the teacher knock off 5 points for it being late? So you got a 95, and you're really upset. You realize how good a 95 is? And she said, it's not 100. No, it's not, but it's not a 0. It's 95 points better than a 0. Why are you this upset? We do this to God all the time. I'm going to wrap this up now. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. I know. God's like, I know what I think about you. You think you know what I think about you, but I know what I think about you. And I think good things about you. You've been misunderstood before, right? People have thought you didn't like them. Somebody thinks you're snobbish. Somebody thinks you're angry with them and you don't even know why. Right? We do this to God too. God says, no. I know what I think about you. I have good thoughts toward you. Most modern translations use the word plans. I know the plans I have for you. He lays out a plan and he wants us to follow it. Right? Remember, he promises that there's no temptation that can fall your way that you cannot resist. He wouldn't let your path go through something that you can't handle. There's that little meme of that kid going, I just don't want God to stop putting me through things he thinks I can handle. I don't think I'm strong enough. And God's like, but you are. Because he would protect you, even from yourself, from those things. He is a good God. He's a sovereign God. He may require you to take consequence for your actions. But the beautiful thing about that is his children don't take the full brunt of those consequences. God tempers it with that promise. You can handle this. Okay, that's in 1 Corinthians, by the way, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. So we have this idea here that we can look at the situation and say, but if God can make a way out of tragedies, if God can make a way out of problems, even if they're not massive tragedies, waffle bites and things like that, or the equivalent in our lives, why doesn't he just prevent them from even happening? Right? Why didn't I just take my daughter off the couch and put her on the floor? As a parent, I was concerned she was going to go down a flight of stairs one day. I needed her to understand. I wanted her to understand. I believe she had to learn to understand what falling was like. And I didn't want it to happen at a really severe consequence. A little scare should be enough. Okay, so why doesn't God do it? And here's the answer. God sees everything in the big picture. Okay? God does not look at you as you are right now. He sees you as you are right now. No question about that. But remember, he's bigger than this. Okay? What you are right now, the adult that you are, the young adult that you are, the old adult that you, whatever we might be right now, is only what we are right now. God sees your entire timeline, beginning to end. I mean, in this regard, we can almost go to Greek mythology where like the fates are weaving that thread, and that long line of thread is your entire life. That's what God is looking at. God doesn't just see moments of what your life is. So we're going through, this is a bad thing right now. And God's like, yeah, but in the big picture, this puts you in position for something you're going to need that will be so much better in the long run. A mild bit of discomfort for the moment, and all of a sudden it all ties together. God does not deal in moments. He deals in forevers. Okay, I'm sorry, a little enamored of that phrase. God does not deal in moments. He deals in forevers. Happiness depends on circumstances. Joy is derived from the conviction that despite present circumstances, God is in control. And that is how we can have joy even when things are coming apart at the seams. Even when things are going badly, we can sit there and go, this is sad. I'm not going to rejoice and jump up and down and say, I'm so happy this is happening, but I can rejoice that I know my God is not only going to see me through, but he's going to do something with this. And if you need examples of that, Moses' life, Joseph's life, Jesus' life, bad things happen to them. Paul's life. And Paul is like, I thank God. Remember, he said this, I thank God upon every remembrance of you, to the Philippians. Remember that phrase? It was like chapter 1. I thank God upon every remembrance of you. Like when you arrested me and threw me in that stanky little prison, I thank God for that moment. Paul, that wasn't good. What's wrong with you, Paul? But Paul knows that moment led to the prayers at midnight. That moment led to the earthquake. That moment led to the guard about to kill himself, but realizing they're there and accepting the Lord. And that moment led to the founding of the Philippian church. So Paul's like, as crummy as that was, and it was not pleasant. Paul never says, I love that moment, but he loves what that moment led to. If you can trust God when bad things happen, you know God's working them out. Now, this is easy to manipulate. If I were your king, so I know things are going badly, but trust me, I have a plan. I'm a human being. I don't know what's going on. So politicians will often pretend there's this whole big, so don't worry about it. Even parents sometimes, I don't know what's going on, but I don't want my kid to worry, so I'll just tell them it's going to be all right. But when God says it's going to be all right, he's not just blowing smoke. He's not just telling us. He's the sovereign God. It's under his control. The things that you've been through that have made you who you are, you can look back on and go, this is why I'm where I am right now. Now, to some degree, there's some negative things that you've allowed yourself to be in, but God has let you go through things that have made you stronger, made you better prepared, made you able to help someone who needs it. You've been through some things that people have been through worse, and they wouldn't listen to me, but they'll listen to you because you went through something kind of like what they went through. Or maybe they'll listen to me because I've gone through something that was difficult, and they can go, so you understand. Did God make the bad thing happen so I could help that person? No, but remember the promise. All things work together for good. They will become useful. God can turn even things meant for evil into something that benefits you, those around you, in the end. That's the key to the sovereignty of God. He can steer while you are making your choices. And he's going to nudge this way, and he's going to and if you're a follower of the Lord, if you've learned to trust this, it's so much easier to deal with. You just look for the steps. They're there. It's not easy to do right away. If you're still struggling with this, don't you make yourself so. It's something you have to learn to do. And sometimes you fall off the couch. And God picks you back up, and you've learned a thing, right? So I realize we're out of time, and I don't have the time to do this. I was going to kind of, it's my last page here. Back to the rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. I've actually covered just about everything I wanted to cover. There's one last thing I wanted to tell you, though. How many of y'all made it out for the silver anniversary on Saturday? A lot of you guys made it there. Oh, wow. It was a good crowd, right? A lot of people here. A lot of people forgot. I talked to a bunch of like, oh, that was this Saturday. It's kind of sad. They gave in the offering, which is sweet, but they didn't get to come out. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more. I don't know how many of you, I know Mary's been around for a long time. I've been here for a long time. Some of you guys have known Pastor Frank. So how many people were actually at Bright Clouds? That's right. You were there. You were there. You remember Bright Clouds. Okay, all the way back on Clapboard Ridge. Okay. Do you go back as far? Were you in the old theater? You were. Oh, wow. Okay, so and you were too. So the church has a long, long history. Pastor Frank's been here for 25 years. I've been here for about 22 of those 25 years. You've been here longer than that. You predate Pastor Frank then, right? You guys, yeah. So just as a follow the course of events, okay? And I'm going to give you this really, really briefly here. About 40 years ago, my mom was a CCD teacher. If you were raised Roman Catholic, you know that's like Sunday school on Wednesdays, okay, after school. My mom she was a Boy Scout troop leader. She was a Brownie troop leader. She was very involved in my sister and in our growing up. And when it came down to somebody had to teach the religious construction, is what it was called at the time, she volunteered, just giving the curriculum, and a bunch of kids would come to our home after school, and she would basically do a Sunday school, whether she was trained for it or not. She was involved. At some point, because of that, okay, follow the dominoes. Because of that, she was asked to recruit more moms, because let's face it, nobody wants to do this. So at the end of the session, she calls all the parents, like, would you be interested in doing it? Would you be interested to do it? She calls the lady, and the lady says, I'm terribly sorry, I don't have the time to do it because I already teach a women's Bible study. My mom says, what a weird thing to do. Why would anyone need an adult Bible study? This is for kids, right? She invites my mom. Turns out she's just about a block away, right on the other side of the neighborhood. My mom decides to go. My mom gets saved. My mom comes home. I see it. I get saved. My sister gets jealous. My sister gets saved. My dad waits out about 6 months and finally says, okay, I give in. My dad gets saved. Now, we are Roman Catholic. We're living in a Roman Catholic church. We have a really, really great priest who's a young guy. He's not the Monsignor. He's not in charge. But he's actually going to be leaving, heading off to seminary. And he tells my mom that the situation right now, the charismatic movement was underway. This is the 70s into the 80s. And he tells my mom that there's this cute little church at the end of the road up here, Georgia Road. It's about 1.5 miles away. A little white church in the middle of the wilderness. It's a good church. Check it out. My mom, raised Catholic, believed that if you entered a Protestant church as a Catholic, it was do not pass go, do not collect $200. You go straight to hell, and that's it. You're not allowed to. But a priest gave her permission. Because of that priest, I do not remember his name. I want to say Father James. Father James was leaving anyway, and things were going in a different direction in that church, and we were given permission to go to a Protestant church. Because we went to that Protestant church, turns out it was a First Assembly of God in Freehold, New Jersey. My family got heavily, heavily involved. My dad became the church treasurer. He was a deacon. I became one of the junior youth leaders and eventually a youth leader at the church. My mom was the principal of the school, all because she went to the pastor and said, hey, we could use Christian education. My kids are growing up and they could use, I really love, because we're traveling like 45 minutes every day. And the pastor's like, cool, look into it. Okay, my mom did all the research, and the next thing, cool, we'd like you to be principal. All that develops over this time. Our pastor, through a series of events, ends up retiring. Okay, it's time for him to step out. Some circumstances led to this, and he needed to step down, and a new pastor gets hired. The new pastor doesn't like Christian education, doesn't want his kids in this school, doesn't want our church to have a Christian school, but he said all the right things when he was hired, and things got ugly. Real short version, we went through a church split. It is probably the darkest time my family ever faced in church. It is really bad when children of God turn on children of God. Okay? It gets ugly. And the world looks at it and goes, saying they're all the same. Okay? This was a really, really uncomfortable position. Rather than fall apart, rather than leave the church, rather than leave God and say, I don't want anything to do with that, we saw a mass exodus. Our entire school migrated out of that church and found a new covering. We found a group of pastors from different churches, some Baptist, some Presbyterian, some Catholic, all said, we'll be the spiritual cover, and we created an independent church. I think of the 54 families we had in the church, 52 of them moved to the new school. So you see, this was a big exodus, okay? But we left, for whatever it's worth, this is not relevant, but April 1st of that year, they had a vote of no confidence, and they fired that pastor, okay, on April Fool's Day. But the damage had already been done, okay? My family became kind of the target for all of this because she ran the school, Dad ran the finances of the church. They became the focal point, and bad things were said. I was about 18, 19 years old at the time. I'm too young to be taken seriously. It's hard. It's hard. To watch your parents get run through the ringer was awful. Awful. It was enough to shake your faith. My family found themselves looking for a new church. We did not say, that's it, we're done with God. We did not say, that's it, we're done with church. We found another church. It's called Abundant Life. It was just a tiny little church, maybe 100 members total, 100 attendees total, maybe 45 of them were members. I mean, it was a small little church. Pastor Chris Fraley, if you were there at the 25th the other night, you might have got a chance to meet him. Pastor Chris Fraley, great guy, caught us when we needed it. Okay, we were falling. He was there to catch us. We started going to that church, and if you were there at the 25th, you heard the story. Pastor Frank was in that church as a young youth leader, also like I did. In fact, Pastor Chris heard about the damage and the hurt that had been done to me, having lost my whole youth group, and said, I want you to work with this young fellow Frank here. The two of us were youth leaders together for a little while. He was in charge at the time, but I got to help out. I wasn't going back into ministry. I wanted nothing to do with that. I was just going to sit in church because I'm a godly person, and that's all I was going to do. God pushed me back into where I need to be. I thank Pastor Frank for that, and he wasn't even Pastor Frank at the time. Pastor Fraley caught that vision, and yes, the story is true. It was in the video. My mom looked up. I remember it. We were standing there, and she's like, that's a good-looking guy. To my sister. My sister's like, Mom? Okay. And apparently Frank's mom said the same thing to him. That's a good-looking girl. Okay. And he said, I'm going to date her. Okay. Everything from that point brings us to this faith church right now. Everything from that point. Those events seem totally unrelated. Now, I'm not taking credit. I'm not saying the reason we have faith church is because my family went through this. A reason. There are a lot of other directions. Everything else fell into place. God sits there and he takes like a whole bunch of pickup sticks or a whole bunch of a deck of cards, throws them in the air, and it comes down as a house of cards. Okay, it's astonishing how everything drops in the way it needs to go because the steps of the righteous are ordered of God. God allowed my family to go through probably the worst experience you could go through in a church. And he knew it was going to come out better in the end. We were stronger for it. We were better off. And I can tell you there's other testimonies from other people who also went through similar things with us, and their churches went different, and things got better for them. But truthfully, the only reason Pastor Frank ever came to Connecticut was following the girl that he met at that church, that we were only there because our pastor was not a godly man. How does God put all this together? Do you know the story of Balaam? Balaam is a prophet. He's asked to curse the Israelites. He's like, God said no. And it's all in the book of Numbers 22. God says, don't do it. But they offer him a lot of money. And Balaam's like, I'm going to do it. And God's like, if you go, you better say what I want you to say. But the next verse says, and God was angry that he went. So God didn't say, it's okay for you to go if you say my things. He knew he wasn't going to. Balaam travels on, and we're told that as they go, an angel of the Lord comes to kill him. That's it. You're not going to curse my people, God says. I'm going to take you out. You're done. Okay? And the donkey keeps getting to the side, moving to the side, and Balaam gets madder and madder, and finally yells at the donkey, beats the donkey, and the donkey says, and there's the moment where we go, what? Okay, the donkey says, why are you beating me? I saved your life. There's an angel here ready to kill you. At which point his eyes are open and he sees the angel and he knows, oh my, I've done the wrong thing. It's an amazing story. But here's the thing I want you to see. Chapter 22, verse 22. God's anger was aroused. This is Numbers chapter 22, verse 22. God's anger was aroused because he went, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. And he was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. Bob and Steve were riding right next to him. God talks to people. I mean, read your Bible, people. God doesn't talk to donkeys often. This time, I have to believe that Bob and Steve were like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to be the one. He's getting mad at me. I'm just a servant. I think they had an opportunity. God will use the dog next door if you're not willing. Honest truth, if Pastor Frank had not pursued Lisa, if Pastor Frank had not come up this way, God would have put someone else in this position. Faith Church would be here. It would be different. But the vision that Pastor Frank had is the path God laid out for us. God is a sovereign God. God is a good God. And as a result, we can rejoice always. And when the big problems come up, oh boy, I know there's a pony in here somewhere. There's a problem right now. What's God going to do with this? That's how you rejoice even when things are going wrong. Okay? That's not a come at me, bro. I'm not challenging. I don't want bad stuff to happen, Joe, so I can show you that, see how you... I don't know how to do it sometimes either, but I get a little better each time. You can see problems, and you can see God working, and if you believe he's sovereign, you can trust him. And I'm going to get really arrogant here, but I'm going to end with Philippians 3:15. Therefore, let us, as many as are mature, have this mind. And if in anything you think otherwise, God will reveal even this to you. I love that verse. I love that Paul's like, don't throw down. You don't have to agree with me, but God will show you you're wrong. And there it is. God is a sovereign God who has given us free will. He allows us to participate, and he doesn't let that get in the way of blessing us anyway. The steps of a righteous person are ordered of God. Yes. Always. He does not. Absolutely. And that's the point. Absolutely, absolutely, and make sure that should be part of your. When I say a prayer and I'm asking the Lord for something, you got to remember. But however you think it works best is what I want it to be. I really want it to be my way. I mean, I'll be honest with God too. I mean, I'd rather you do it like this. But if there's a better way, you see the end zone. You see how it all plays out. Okay, you can sit there going, but I really, really want that Ferrari. And God knows that you driving a Ferrari means wrapped around a telephone pole in 3 weeks. Better if you don't have one. Like, but why don't I win the lottery? God knows you with money right now, maybe later, right now, not a good scenario. Okay, this is how people get drawn into drugs. This is how you look at how many famous people get super wealthy and then fall apart. I don't know what you're capable of. I know you think you know what you can handle. Okay, we do the same thing with just about anything. I'm sure I could eat 6 more of these. Oh, I don't feel good. Yeah, you should have stopped at 2, okay? Ultimately, God knows the end as well if you trust. And that's really what it is. We don't trust God. We're fearful that he might not do what he says he'll do, and he tells us to test him. He'll do it, right? Any other questions? Any other comments? I realize I've gone long. I was joking about going long, but I'm like laughing because I know we don't have to do the chairs.
I think you have to remember what the word says.
Absolutely.
And I think that helps us to stand when times are tough.
No, absolutely. And it's a growth process. It really is. If anyone is here right now and you're feeling like convicted that you're just not good at this, you're just not there yet. Remember what I said about the timeline. It's the all of you. It's your forever that God is looking at. You're getting there. You just keep on being faithful to it. So I'm going to say farewell and good night. I just so happy that you guys were able to stick around. I went way longer than I was thinking I was going to. But I really appreciate you guys being here. So God bless. Have a great night.